Welcome to another Fact or Fiction Friday. I am the guinea pig, Christopher McKell. My esteemed colleague, the professor, Jason Parsons. This week, we're going to be a little more technical than usual. We are going to talk about, are all calories created equal? Jason, is that true or is that false?
Contrary to what a lot of people say on the internet, Chris, this is actually true.
Woo!
There's a lot of caveats that go with that to better explain why it's true, and I think it starts with explaining what the heck a calorie is to begin with, so it makes sense to people. So let's start with that. A calorie, this term that's thrown around haphazardly all over the interwebs, is a description of the amount of energy something has, in this case with our food, providing to us. The term itself is the amount of energy needed to increase 1 gram, this tiny little square here, 1 gram of water up 1 degree centigrade at sea level. Really don't need to know that. There's not going to be a test at the end here or anything like that, so don't worry about that. But that's where it comes from, right? The universal standard for calories. So when we look at food, it's amount of calorie available in those foods. And for example, protein over here, that little tiny speck right there, that 1 gram, if that was protein, it would have 4 calories. And you can see we've written out here in the technical terms, 4 kilocalories per gram. That's Chris's handwriting right there. So protein has 4 calories per gram. If you were to eat carbohydrates, having some sugar, something like that, that same space, also 4 calories per gram. We didn't write it up here because we're trying to not instigate too much out there. I know Chris enjoys this once in a while, but 7 calories per gram are available for alcohol. It is a macronutrient, so I figured I'd throw it in there. I just want to put the image up there. And then finally, fat over here. Interestingly enough, the exact same size, 1 gram, that the protein has 4 calories, carbohydrate has 4 calories, fat has more than twice as many calories. It has 9 calories per gram. So the exact same space. And of course, doesn't matter what the thing is, if you're having a piece of food this big, if it's carbohydrates, proteins, or fats, it's going to have that same ratio of total amount of energy available. Why do we care about that? Ultimately, everything I've taught you as we've gone through time over the years to help you to lose weight, Chris, and what we've talked about in each of these videos we've worked on, is that to lose weight, you have to have more calories going out through activity, whether that's your daily activity of work and doing things with your kids and going to the mailbox or whatever it is, plus your exercise at the gym, right, going over Orange Theory. That total activity has to have more calories being used than you consume in food. So we're trying to decrease calories in your mouth, how much energy, and increase activity, energy being used through your day. That's how you lose weight. More going out than going in, right? Yeah. So the calorie is just a way of measuring that. It may as well be miles per hour to gauge how fast you're going, or gallons to determine how much water you have. It's just a unit of measurement. It's not a real thing. It's a unit of measurement. And that's important to understand because the reason this phrase up here, all calories are created equal, people start to get confused because they think that means all foods are created equal. And that's not true. All macronutrients, proteins, carbs, and fats are created equal. They're not. They're very different in how they affect your body, how you enjoy them. A lot of people really enjoy carbohydrates, sugars, sweets, especially here in America. Most Americans have probably 70% of their diet coming from sugars and carbohydrates. That's a lot. It's a huge amount. So one of the first things I did with Chris when we started working together was decrease the total amount of calories he was getting from his rice and beans, because he's Cuban American, did I get that correct? Decrease the total carbohydrates, not because they're bad, but because he was having too much of them, and increase some fats and protein to make him satisfied so he's not hungry all the time, and because of this thing over here we're going to talk about
Before
next.
we move on to this, just a quick question to clarify for layman's out there like myself that some of this
lay
stuff
people?
gets, yeah, lay people. We say all calories created equal, and yes, it says 4 calories for 9. I don't want people to get confused that it's actually different calories. It's just a amount of the food. So if everything being the same, if it was this much fat and this much a piece of bread or whatnot and this much chicken, that's just the calories that would be in that size.
For the same exact size of each of these things, this one has twice as many calories.
Right.
Not good, not bad. I'm not saying don't have fats. Fats have absolute necessity in your diet. All of your hormones come from fats, from cholesterol. You need to have fats for your fat-soluble vitamins. Your whole brain is made up of fat. You have a fat head, right? That's just what your brain is, water and fat. That's what our brains are. So we need fats in our diets. We just don't want to have excess of anything. And for a weight loss goal, we want to control total calories. This is probably one of the easier levers to pull when it comes to reducing calories, just because there's twice as many per unit of space, right? So teaspoon, 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 twice as many here. So it's easy to manipulate that. However, this is the one most people abuse the most because processed sugars in the form of sodas and juices and things like that, as well as pastries and all kinds of other fun, exciting processed foods, we just overeat too many of these. So I don't ever like to bastardize a macronutrient. That's definitely not what we're doing here. But with you being informed of how much energy is available in a given unit of size for any food stuff, it lets you make better choices. That's why this information is important.
Cool.
Does that help out a little bit?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I hope it helped everyone else understand.
So what I was saying here is the most important thing I like to look at, and why I recommend it to you, to increase protein in your diet, as well as some fats, and decrease your carbohydrates. Again, not because it's a bad guy, but because fats not only help you feel fuller for longer. When you eat fats and consume them, they go down to your stomach and they release this hormone called cholecystokinine, CCK for short. That's a big fancy one. There is a test on that one at the end, by the way. Cholecystokinine. So cholecystokinine, it just makes you feel full. Your body can sense those fats in the stomach, and your brain's like, hey man, I don't need to have a whole bunch of this stuff that's real nutrient dense, 9 calories per gram. You feel fuller. So that's one of the reasons I like to increase fats in people's diets. As far as increasing protein in their diet, the thermic effect of food, this big fancy science term we use over here with nutrition, basically talks about how much energy it requires to break down a foodstuff, toast, an avocado, and a nice juicy T-bone. I like how you didn't cook that T-bone. I like that as medium rare as possible.
Like it raw.
Just don't overcook this T-bone, people. That's terrible. Shame on you. So, with these different foods here, there's a different amount of energy your body needs to break it down. And that includes the chewing process, swallowing, digestion in the stomach, where you use acids and enzymes and your stomach muscle actually squeezes and moves it around, the absorption inside your intestines where additional enzymes are working in there. All that requires energy. Your body has to work to do that. Now, that work or thermic effect of the foods is different based on what the food's made of. In the case of things that are carbohydrate and fat, it takes between 5 and 15% of the calories that that food had available just to break it down. So that means if you ate 100 calories of toast or 100 calories of fats like an avocado, your body is going to take on average about 10% of that to break it down. So you're only even having 90 calories available to be absorbed, distributed, put in your tissues and be used. That's a cool thing to know, is that you're not even getting 100 calories. So if you're tracking this stuff in your app, right? Write it down however you choose to track it. That's some useful information.
Very interesting.
The more important thing I like to push for people getting protein in there is if you look here, that same food stuff over here, protein, 20 to 35% of the calories that's available in a protein source are used to break it down. It's a very complex food. The proteins themselves require a lot more work, not just from chewing a piece of steak, especially if it's a terrible piece of steak. That's not good, right? A lot of gristle. But your stomach has to do more work. You have to use the acid in your stomach is mostly there to break down proteins, just so you know. Other enzymes have to be released to break them down. So there's way more work done to break down proteins. On average, about 30% of the calories from protein are used just to break it down. That means that same 100 calories of protein, only 70 calories are even available to be used by your body.
So, I don't know if you would know this answer, and I don't want to put you out there and make it a claim or anything. Two things. One is most apps base it on the actual calories, not the difference here, and what's on the back of the food labeling, the calories there, that's the actual calories, not what actually would end up being in your system.
Correct. That is correct. So in essence, when you look at the label on a can of soup, when you look at your food app and you're checking out to see how much is in this piece of chicken breast, it's going to give you the total calories available in that food. It doesn't take into consideration the thermic effect of food and how your body breaks it down, or whether or not it's been cooked oftentimes. Cooking is a breaking down of foods. That's part of the processing of foods. Taking an apple, plucking it off the tree, starts the breaking down of that apple. It actually starts to ripen at that point. It changes. Chewing it, taking a bite, that's processing the food. Swallowing it is processing it. Breaking it down in your stomach is processing. All these processes change the bioavailability of the food. And the same thing is true of what you're seeing on that label. So it's just giving you the raw number that starts with. It's not taking that into consideration. So what does that mean for you? In the case of you specifically, and a lot of our people out there that are looking to lose weight, you can purposely choose foods that have more proteins in them as opposed to fats and carbs to increase the demand of the body to break it down and decrease the available calories from that food due to the thermic effect of food there. So gives you an opportunity. It's another lever you can pull with that weight loss goal. Finally down here, the one piece that I really like to talk about, I've been saying swapping out fats or proteins for carbs all this time. Again, I want to make sure everybody knows I'm not bad-mouthing carbohydrates. They're absolutely a necessary part of your diet. They are the #1 source of energy for your brain up here, that big fat brain you got, we talked about, right? So with that being said, if we're typically consuming too much carbohydrate, it's just a major part of your diet, instead of getting rid of the whole amount of carbohydrates, maybe change where their sources are coming from. So what I like to do is talk about something called resistant starches. So you can see down here a green banana. This is a sweet potato, and then we have some black beans over here. Beans, rice, legumes like green beans, things like that. Tubers like sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, and then bananas and plantains, the green variety. In their raw state, unprocessed, they have a higher percentage of their carbohydrates that are starches that are called resistant starches. Resistant starches basically are kind of starch that your body can't break down in the stomach and intestine and absorb, so it gets shot all the way down past the intestine, small intestine to the large intestine, where the gut bacteria that you have will begin to use that as an energy source. That's their fuel, that's the food that makes them go. So when we look at these raw versions, most people aren't going to eat raw green bananas. They're pretty bitter, right? That's that starch. Right? When a banana starts to ripen, it's chemically changing. It's turning those starches into sugars. That's why it gets sweet. That's when it changes from green to yellow. When you cook a sweet potato or beans or rice from their natural state, you cook them, and that chemical process changes some of those starches into sugars. Interestingly enough, here's the fun fact and a trick you can use with your sweet potatoes, your baked potatoes, your rice, and your beans. Cook them to your desired liking and let them cool back down to room temperature, and they'll convert back into some of those resistant starches again. So eating them hot is changed into starches your body can absorb, sugars your body can absorb. You're going to get most of those calories absorbed. However, if you let your cooked potatoes, cooked sweet potatoes, cooked rice, and cooked beans cool back down after you cook them, it actually converts back into resistant starches. And interestingly enough, just like with the thermic effect of food, a lesser percentage is available here. If you do the same thing with these cooked foods, that same 100 calories of sweet potato or black beans that you cooked, you cool it down, only half the calories will even be bioavailable anymore. You can't even use them. Half the calories. That's a great way to still eat as much, the quantity of food that you like, and get less of it being absorbed, therefore less calories going into your body.
Very, very strange and interesting. Question I have is, I'm Cuban, I like my beans and rice, but I also like my green plantains here, and we slice them up and we fry them. Same here, I love my sweet potato fries.
Yes.
So by frying stuff, does that add more calories to this equation?
So good, two points of that, good question. Frying is a cooking technique, just like steaming or microwaving or roasting, grilling, any of the number of temperature increasing methods. The temperature is what changes the chemical composition of foods. That's why an egg white turns opaque and white, solid white instead of clear when you cook it. That's why steaks go from red to brown. You're chemically altering it. That's what the heat does. It's a chemical reaction, right? So adding heat to your plantains or your sweet potatoes when you slice them up and fry them, it's just one method. Now, I cook a lot. You can see I chopped half my finger off here the other day making some sushi. I'm not really good with the knives. Definitely not going on Iron Chef anytime soon. But I like to cook a lot of different methods. One of the things I understand as a chef is that when you fry things, you want to find an oil and a temperature that's high enough that the foods aren't absorbing it. Get an oil like peanut oil or something that has a high smoke point so it doesn't burn, right? And also cook at a high enough temperature that your foods, in this case plantain chips or your sweet potato fries, are not just sort of gurgling in the oil, absorbing it up. It should be hot enough that that oil is actually making a steam barrier around the food and the oil doesn't get absorbed. So if you cook it right, if your restaurant you go to is preparing things properly, your foods, in this case plantains or sweet potato fries, aren't getting any extra calories from the oil. In the event there's a little, you can take a paper towel and dab it off so you're not getting extra calories from that. So that's one thing, right? Second thing, again, just like we talked about, go ahead and make your plantains, cook them. Go ahead and make your sweet potato fries, cook them. Let them cool down. Eat them cold. It might not be as palatable, but just like I showed you out here, it's going to cut in half the total number of calories you even absorb. You get to enjoy your yummy food that's a staple of your diet and reduce the total calories just because you let it cool off. That's a pretty cool trick right there.
Very cool. Cooling down the sweet potato fries. All right, I'll give that a try.
One last little thing, we did put a little sugar packet picture up here I want to talk about. I've talked about the processing of foods, right? So the processing of picking an apple, chewing an apple, swallowing it, digesting it down here, all those things. The same thing with this, slicing it up, that's processing that plantain. Frying it, that's processing it. Cooling it off is actually processing it too, as odd as that seems. Heating is a chemical reaction, cooling is a chemical reaction. So all these steps that we do with these whole foods, Over here, we have simple sugar, table sugar like sucrose, or even some other sweeteners, fructose and glucose that we find in different sweet foods, bakery goods and stuff. That's a simple processed sugar that's gone from a sugar beet or a piece of sugar cane and been broken down to its simplest form. It's already been processed. There's no work involved by you to swallow this and absorb it. No work, no chewing needed, no digestion in the stomach. It's already a simple sugar. And the same thing is true of any of these other things that if they get converted. An avocado requires effort to chew it up. Avocado oil does not. This piece of toast came from wheat at one point. If you were to go out and get wheat and chew wheat up and break it down, that requires effort from chewing and digesting. That has that thermic effect of food. Having the bread that's already been processed, not as much, right? Not as much thermic effect of food. The more you process a food, the further from raw a food goes towards the cooked or processed end of the spectrum, the less thermic effect of food, the more calories you actually absorb. Now, this is a good thing for humans since we have fire, we started cooking things over fire because cooking is a process with foods. It makes it so you get more energy out of it. And in places, in old caveman times, we needed as much energy as we could because food was rare and the next woolly mammoth might be 2 weeks away before we caught that sucker. So we had to get as much energy out as possible. Now we have a grocery store every 12 feet and there's food falling in my pockets as we speak. We have an overabundance of food and we have too many calories. So oddly enough, we want to go the opposite direction that we used to hundreds if not thousands of years ago, where we wanted to have more processed foods to get as much energy as possible. If you're overweight and you don't want to get as much energy as possible, you want to go the other direction. So move back towards less processed foods. This as your source of carbohydrates instead of simple sugars inside of a soda or a juice drink or some ice cream or something like that. There's no effort needed for a soda for that to be broken down. It's already in its simplest form. There's no thermic effect of food. You're getting all those calories.
I should have drawn that woolly mammoth. It would have been a cool picture.
Yeah, woolly mammoth. We don't have a brown marker. Oh well.
Cool. Well, I hope you guys understood a lot of what Jason was saying. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to leave comments below. Ask any questions. We'll get to them as quickly as we can. You'll get a great response from the professor.
Lots of
I'll chime in as much as I can. So again, this is one of our true Fact or Fiction Fridays and not our false ones, although there's some little differences there. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm Chris McKell, the Professor Jason Parsons, sorry. We're signing off. Till next week.